Bernie Finkelstein is the Brian Epstein of Canada, the Colonel Tom Parker of the True North Strong and Free. He's the manager of Bruce Cockburn and Barney Bentall and the Legendary Hearts. I mean, as much as a rock band or a rock act can be managed. But the good news also is that he's a science fiction fan. Let's ring him up if we can. Let's make the connection. Bernie?
Yeah?
Hello, Bernie. Can you hear me? It's Commander Rick. Hang on. There.
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, hi, Rick.
Hi. I understand you're really into science fiction. When did you start getting into it?
I started reading it probably when I was 10 or 11 years old.
So that was, what, 12 years ago?
That was about, yeah, 12, maybe 13 years ago.
13 years ago?
That's right, yeah.
What did you start reading?
Well, I just picked up a book, as I remember it, at the library, and one of the first books I remember reading was The Voyage of the Space Beagle. I think it was by A. Van Gogh, or Van Vogt.
Yeah, Van Vogt. Who was Canadian? Did you know that?
I didn't even know he was Canadian until about a year ago, and I read this article on him, and I didn't realize he lived in Winnipeg, or born in Winnipeg, and worked in Ottawa, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, now he's a big friend with L. Ron Hubbard and into the Dianetics and all that.
Well,
sort
I
of
think
stuff,
that's forgivable.
Well, okay. Are rock stars, rock acts into science fiction?
Oh, I think I can't speak for them all, but just almost everybody I've ever worked with has liked it a little or liked it a lot, but certainly was aware of it.
For example, who likes it a lot?
Well,
come on, name drop, Bernie.
No, I don't mind. I mean, I don't mind saying. I mean, I make it clear that they have other interests. But I mean, for instance, Bruce Cockburn likes science fiction and he loves comics. In fact, in '74, when Bruce put out an album called Night Vision, he gave some credits to people for inspirations, and one of the people that he mentioned was Samuel Delany. And about a year later, in '75, Delany put out a book called Triton. It takes place on the moon, and Delany has one of his characters in turn singing Bruce's songs in the year 2020 on this moon. He's a wandering balladeer, and he's singing Mama Wants the Barrel House and Blues Have Got the World by the Balls, and he's sort of like, the character can't quite remember who wrote these songs, but they were just great songs of another era, and they were being sung on this moon, so it was quite a thrill. So there's some cross-pollination, but
do they know each other well, Bruce and Samuel?
No, they talked once or twice, but I don't think there's been any real formal contact in years.
Well,
it just happened through their work,
Because they're both writing with a real caring and an edge to their... I mean, it's not just entertainment what either of them are putting out. They're both putting out something with a strong message.
Yeah.
Who else is into science fiction?
Well, one of the people that really turned me on to it, I mean, I know you're looking for rock stars, but I'll just say is a guy who does all our album jackets, Bart Scholes, who is kind of a wild guy. But when Murray McLaughlin would read stuff, and I can't imagine that anybody's not into it to some degree, really. I mean, I think that rock and roll and, the whole cyberpunk thing,
From William Gibson, yeah.
I mean, it gets hard after a while to really know whether the writers are inspired first by rock and roll, if you like, or whether rock and roll is later inspired by some of these writers, and I don't even know if it's worth finding out, really, but...
Well, there's certainly, every time I see a Rush video, I feel like I'm watching a promo for the next major science fiction film. There's a lot of elements in what they do.
Well, now with rock video, I mean, you can just tie the whole thing together again. But certainly, like all the heavy metal images, to my mind, certainly come from science fiction and come from the comic book milieu. And now I think comic books are in turn re-inspired by a lot of what they see in heavy metal. It's a lot wilder than any of the comic book people could have ever imagined.
They're both pushing limits. What do you I mean, rock and roll is basically about sex in a lot of ways. But there's people like Bruce Cockburn who are taking it beyond that to some other levels, social levels. What do you think science fiction's about?
Well, science fiction is just about everything, from the reading that I've done. I mean, it covers everything, but I think one of the really important things that it does is, I read this thing, by Martin Amis, is it?
Kingsley Amis?
Yeah, but his son.
Oh, right, yeah.
Martin Amis, who put out this book called Einstein's Monsters, short stories. And in the preface to the book, he says that he has a hard time Well, in fact, he's describing arguments he has with his father about the fact that in this particular world, with nuclear disaster looming around the corner at all times, he couldn't take seriously any novelist that didn't write science fiction, near futures, about what could happen with nuclear destruction, etc. And that he just felt any author that didn't deal with those subjects wasn't to be taken seriously.
Do you think rock and roll and science fiction both blossomed because of that 1950s and onward angst that we ain't going to be here tomorrow? I mean, we're the first generation that grew up with that, knowing that tomorrow we could all look like burnt matchsticks, and it doesn't make a lot of sense to spend too much time doing some things.
Well, there's a certain amount of that, but I mean, it doesn't even have to be seen so seriously, I don't think. I mean, the beautiful thing about science fiction, as far as I'm concerned, is that you open up the book and you get totally lost in different worlds, you know, and to some degree, this world that we're in, you know, I tend to think that I know a lot about it already, you know, and I'm kind of interested in what's going to happen tomorrow. And I find kind of futurists to be boring. But when they're writing stories, it becomes more exciting to me, and I'm interested in it.
There's also the possibility, rock and roll is about possibilities, about breaking down barriers, and to me science fiction is about the exact same thing, about taking things and looking at them from a completely different angle.
I mean, rock and roll is something I think that breaks a lot of taboos and always has, and probably always will if it's going to be meaningful, and that's exactly what science fiction does. It does exactly the same thing. It allows, both of those fields allow you to examine anything and deal with it, you know, the way you feel you want to deal with it, and you're not restricted or restrained by the past.
Who are the bands that are using science fiction imagery in the music videos and in the songs? Is there any?
You know, Rush, as you mentioned earlier, I mean,
right.
really I think use it a lot.
I mean, it isn't a Rush song unless somewhere or other they say humanity. Or
there's a lot of comics and stuff too. I mean, I'm more familiar with Canadian stuff. You know, like Gowan's video.
Strange Animal.
Criminal Mind.
Yeah.
Well, both of them, Criminal Mind and Strange Animal, with the cartoons and. Oh, there was one out on Ready Records that was really neat. God, the group didn't go anywhere. I can't remember. But you know what? You know, I was just over in Europe and I was watching some stuff. They were showing Japanese clips.
Right.
And the Japanese groups all look like they just came out of Mad Max. You know,
right. The Kiss metal.
Yeah, I mean Kiss and that whole scene.